Hello and welcome to the latest episode of IndyStar High School Hoops Weekly. I'm your host, Matt Glenesk. I am joined by IndyStar's two high school insiders. We have Kyle Neddenriep to my near left, your near right, covering boys basketball, and all the way at the end of the other end of the stage, whatever this is Matthew VanTryon, who covers girls basketball for IndyStar and does it better than I think we've ever covered girls basketball, and Kyle, better than we've ever covered boys basketball.
I would say.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah, no. They're great, guys. They're great, and it's all from their fearless leader that it all just funnels down to how great they are. All right, so on this episode of IndyStar High School Hoops Weekly, we will go over what both of our insiders learned last week. We will show highlights of the game of the week. This week it is Avon versus Cathedral boys basketball. It was a heck of a game. Kyle was there. We've got plenty of highlights to show you. And then we'll finish the show with some Fab 15s. They unveil their updated Fab 15s and what they're looking for this upcoming week. So without further ado, Matthew, what did you learn last week?
So one thing that we learned is that Carmel has kind of been lurking, I guess. And all of a sudden they've won 5 in a row. They beat Penn 44-40 on Saturday. Penn has been a top 10 team all year long. And if you think about what Carmel has gone through just over the past year and a half or so, from Todd Winland being removed as coach to Kevin Sweeney taking over, and then he suffered an injury on vacation before the season began last season, never actually coached a game. Amy Dilk and Tomi Taiwo, who were players that they relied on heavily for 4 years, graduate. So that they've kind of entered this new era almost. They've entered kind of a new chapter, and I think a lot of people kind of forgot about them in terms of kind of the powerhouses of the state, because you have Fishers and HSE this year. HSE wins a state title last year. Carmel kind of goes by the wayside, but they've won 5 in a row. They're 8-6 this year, and I don't think that anyone's going to want to face them come the tournament. I don't think that they're quite on the level of HSE and Fishers, but they're certainly getting there, and they're a lot closer now than we thought that they would be a month ago.
And you actually have a feature right now on IndyStar.com/sports about the Carmel girls basketball team. So if you want to know more about Carmel, go to our website, read more.
Sydney Parrish and Madison Layden kind of came into this season as the pretty clear mass basketball front runners. It was pretty clear that they were going to be the players that were going to be kind of fighting it out for this award, and both of them have really lived up to that hype. Madison Layden leads the state in scoring with 28.1 points a game. Sydney Parrish has 26 points a game. Madison Layden has all sorts of assists and steals and rebounds, and she kind of does it all. There's some debate, especially on social media, about Northwestern's strength of schedule. They came up from 3A. They certainly don't play the schedule that HSE does, but Madison Layden has certainly kind of cemented herself in that conversation, and it's just kind of neat to see these two players that we expected to be dominating so consistently, and regardless of how that race finishes out, and really that's going to be determined in the state tournament.
You want another plug? Here's another plug. Matthew is going to have another story on IndyStar.com/sports on Madison Layden's dominance. How about that?
That's good.
It's scheduling. Got to get it out of the way. Programming.
And then this week there are a couple of teams with a chance to kind of make a statement against teams that are, punching above them. Mooresville has a chance for its 6th win in 8 games. They play against Mount Vernon, who has 1 loss so far this year. Fishers is going to get tested twice this week. New Palestine visits them on Tuesday. North Central visits them on Saturday. New Palestine is, I think, 12-3 on the season. They've had a pretty good year. They're still kind of a step below Mount Vernon in that sectional, but they, could certainly kind of take a step forward with the win against Fishers. And then North Central is kind of searching for that consistency that they've lacked really kind of all season long. But a win against Fishers, a win against one of those elite teams would give them something they haven't had really all season long. And then Warren Central has won 4 out of 5. They were another team that kind of started slow. They kind of got overlooked quite a bit early this season. and they play HSE this week as well. Obviously, any win against HSE would kind of give them some confidence and maybe kind of raise their profile a little bit.
Yeah, Warren Central having to replace Shayla Beeler and Sydney Dodd as well, so that's no small task. All right, Kyle, you had quite the long day at Marion on Saturday, did you not?
Yeah, saw 6 games up there, 5 boys games and a girls game, and really, came away. A lot of teams I hadn't seen yet this year and wanted to see, and really, I ended up writing about kind of, part of the 5 things to watch for the 5 things we learned from last week was just the visit to Bill Green Arena up there in Marion. They've done a lot of neat things. You would never tell it's built in 1970. Jim Brunner, the longtime radio voice for the Marion Giants, after the last game was over, said, you got 5 minutes. I'll kind of show you some of the new stuff, and ended up being 30, 40 minutes as it can be with Jim Brunner.
You were built in the 1970s too, and you've held up just fine.
Thank you. Yeah. Bill Green Arena is a little bit older than me, but yeah, it was cool. They've done a lot. They've got a kind of a mural down when you first walk in. They've got all their 1,000-point scorers. Just happened to be that night they had all their 1,000-point scorers back. Either if they couldn't be there, like Zach Randolph, they had his stepfather was there, but brought out Jay Edwards, Lyndon Jones. The last one was James Blackman Sr., who's the all-time leading scorer at Marion, and he's about to be passed by his son Jalen here pretty shortly. But ended up watching. Jalen had a really nice, had 36 points, but hurt his knee late in that game. Had to come out against Cathedral. Hopefully that's not. He was walking around. He tried to come back in the game, just couldn't go. And Cathedral ended up winning that game. But Jalen Blackman again had some coaches ask me about him after the game, and really efficient, really good playmaker. Only get a chance to see him every so often just because of where we're at. But I thought he was really impressive. Again, that junior class, as we talk about, is so loaded. He's another one who can just fill it up. He had 30 points in just the second and third quarter alone. And like I said, was super, super efficient. But really fun trip to Marion to see that arena again and kind of get your juices flowing again to be in such a great place.
More on that trip on IndyStar.com/sports as well.
Absolutely. And then number 2 is Cathedral's Wild Weekend. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Like I mentioned, they beat Marion 85-80 in overtime on Saturday night. And then the night before, just a crazy game against Avon. They won that one 91-88. And again, there's some highlights there as you see, and we'll talk more about that later in the show. And then number 3, I thought Trey Galloway returning for Culver Academy was a big deal. Had been out with a wrist injury. They'd been off since before Christmas just because of their having kids from out of state, and they don't normally play over Christmas. But I did talk to Mark Galloway a couple days before. He said it's kind of a touch and go situation. They've talked to doctors. He can't hurt the wrist any further. They don't feel like he's going to be able to play. He's not going to be 100% though, probably until the end of the season. But he did get out there and play against Lawrence Central. And when you talk about that Mr. Basketball race, can he kind of get himself back in there? It's really, it's I think a really wide open race this year when you talk about Anthony Leal, Davis and Pack from LC, and then Tony Perkins, who I think is really solidifying his candidacy with the way they've started this year. So I think a really fun race, and maybe more so than we've seen in previous years, at least the last couple of years, where it seems to be really wide open. It could really come down, like Matthew said with the girls, to what happens in the tournament. And I think we'll see in the sectional LC and LN. I'm guessing they'll play in the Marion County tournament later this month, and then probably again in the sectional, and maybe those games is what it comes down to, at least locally, and then Galloway and Leal. They're in different parts of the state to see how they do in the tournament too.
Another programming note, you saw there DeAndre Davis and Nigel Pack, the duo at LC. Our Greg Doyle will be taking a look at them this week, so be on the lookout for that later this week as well. All right, so now it brings us to the game of the week. Kyle mentioned it, he covered it. It was Avon versus Cathedral. Nearly 200 points were scored in this game. Kyle, walk us through this game. Walk us through really what stood out to you the most during this high-octane game.
Well, it was up tempo from the start. There you see Jaden Brewer, the junior from Avon, but really Krishan McCray, right there, number 2 for Avon. He was the story of the first half. Had 17 points. Brewer a little bit slower of a start, but for Cathedral, Tayshawn Comer was the story. The sophomore point guard, one of the few guys they have returning in their lineup this year. And then you'll see later Grant Togg, he's a senior, averaged 4 points a game last year for Cathedral. He had 20 points against Avon and then 27 against Marion. So he is really busted out this year. You'll see him number 3 in blue at some point here, but really a really good game up and down. Gabe McNary, you see there, number 23, another player who's improved a ton this year. He can pick and pop and shoot the 3 now, and at 6'8", that's going to make him I think a realistic Division I type of prospect. There you see him throwing it down. Still really skinny, but he's worked on his shot so much.
Nice move from Comer right
there.
there.
Comer, that was I believe that was the one that put them ahead by 1 against that zone. And Jeff Holloway, the coach for Avon, kind of beside himself after the game, like, how did he get around? We're playing zone defense. How do we allow him to get to the basket? And he's only 5'10" maybe, and he still managed to do it. Comer's a great player. I talked to him after the game. I'll have a little bit more on him this week and some other recruiting nuggets from the trip to Marion. But really a great game. Cathedral able to get 2 wins, kind of 2 crazy games this week. It's a team that might drive Jason Delaney crazy because they make a lot of mistakes. They're very young, but they're starting to put it together. You can see this week what's possible for that team. And they're very explosive and a fun team to watch. I had a blast watching both their games this weekend.
All right, well, let's see where they end up on your Fab 15 segue. This is Kyle's unveil of his Fab 15. There they are, number 10.
There they are, number 10. And I didn't have too much movement this past week. There weren't a ton of games as we got into the first week of the new year. I will start with number 6 there, Warren Central. Because they have a huge game coming up on Friday. I'm going to be there. They play Lawrence North, and it's a team that their schedule gets really, really difficult. They beat Bedford North Lawrence on Friday night by 3 points, and they stayed undefeated. They're 8-0 right now. Garrett Weininger, the coach there, first-year coach, and a team that really Malik Stanley has been excellent for them early in the season. But now the schedule ramps up. How will they handle a Lawrence North team that by all accounts so far, from everything I've seen, they're the best team around with LC a close number 2. But that'll be a huge test there you see for number 6, Warren Central. Number 8, Christmas Addicts, I'll touch on them too because I saw them on Thursday beat Jeffersonville. A very good Jeffersonville team. People around here probably don't see them as much, obviously, but Trey Coleman. Will Lovings Watts is another guy I'll have a little bit more on this week too. He's a Division I prospect, already has 1 offer and is going to get more. He's only a sophomore and a good player for that Jeffersonville team. But Addicts beat them and then comes back and plays Lawrence North on Saturday and loses by 8. Not a bad loss. I talked to Chris Hawkins a little bit after, and he said Tony Perkins just killed him. He had 35 and shot a lot of free throws. They couldn't really stop him from getting to the free throw line in that game. And then I'm going to skip down to 11 and 12. We'll kind of combine those two, Plainfield and Danville, and actually 14 Avon and 3 Brownsburg. All 4 of those teams playing in the Hendricks County tournament this week, and that should be a great tournament. On Tuesday night, it opens up with Danville and Avon. Brian Barber was out there to watch Avon Friday night. I talked to him a little bit. And
I'm sure he's sweating after watching
that. Yeah,
he
was. I said, your games don't hurt my neck as much watching you guys play compared to Avon. They were up and down. But Danville has a really nice team. Saw them earlier this year. And they'll be a top contender to win that title if they can get past Avon. Brownsburg has a little bit better of a bracket, I would say. Play the host Tri-West in the first game, and then would play Cascade if they win. So that side of the bracket a little bit easier, but very competitive county this year in Hendricks County. So it should be a great tournament this week.
All right, Matthew, your turn. Here's your Fab 15.
So we've touched quite a bit on Lawrence North just over the course of this season, and they're still clearly the top team in the area. They're 18-0 this season, but all season long, you've kind of looked at the end of their schedule. They really have a tough finish to the regular season, and that starts this week. They visit Homestead, who I saw them play a couple of times recently. Homestead is a really good team. They have several pieces. And then the rest of Lawrence North's schedule for the regular season at LC, against HSE, against Fishers, and against Center Grove. So we're going to find out pretty quickly how good Lawrence North is. Obviously, there's a lot of indications that they are a really solid team. They're ranked number 1 in the most recent ICGSA poll, and they're number 3 in the most recent coaches poll. But the odds that they just run the table over these next couple of weeks is certainly nothing. It's not a guarantee. Center Grove is another team down at number 7. They've really kind of impressed this year. I didn't know what to expect out of them after they lost a couple of their leading scorers last year. They've been one of the most impressive teams, along with Martinsville, actually, who's right down below them at number 8. Mary Wilson might be one of the most improved players or the most valuable players for her team in the area. She averaged 9 points a game last year, is up to 15 points a game this year. Her shooting percentage is actually remarkably similar to what it was last year, so this is kind of just an instance of her getting more opportunities and taking advantage of them. They're going to get tested this week. That's Center Grove. When Carmel visits them, we've touched on them a little bit and kind of the resurgence that Carmel has had. So that'll be a good test for both teams to see kind of where both of them are at. And then I want to touch on Brownsburg as well at number 9. They've kind of fallen a little bit. They're 10-7 right now. They've lost 4 out of 5. But their 4 losses, I think, have come by something like a combined 11 points or something like that. So they're right there on the cusp. Allie Becky has been out for a couple of games with an injury, but she should be back this week for the Hendricks County tournament. So they kind of have a chance to get some momentum back, and I still think that they're probably the favorite in their sectional, but they're just kind of going through a rough patch right now, which, unless you're, the Lawrence Norths or Fishers of the world, all the teams do, and it's kind of a testament to the strong ones who can kind of make it back from those.
All right, well, fantastic. Well, they've just given you the breakdown, told you who the best teams are, told you where the best games are this week. So that'll wrap us up here for this week's IndyStar High School Hoops Weekly. He is Matthew VanTryon. He is Kyle Neddenriep. You don't care about me.